Hey, welcome everybody. I'm Szczepanek. This is Pianist Academy. It's good to see many friendly faces, well, friendly names in the chat. So welcome Calais and Becky, Bedlington Groomer, Rob, OCD King, Rhodesy, Bethany. Welcome, Bethany. Welcome back. Quentin, hello. Oh, hello, everybody. I first want to say, I'm not sure if one of you sent me this. I don't know if you can even see it, but it has Pianist Academy on it. And it didn't come from anybody. There was no packing slip. And I asked family and friends, and they all said they didn't send it. So if you sent this, thank you very much. I'm enjoying a nice hot cup of coffee. So yeah, thank you. Let's see. Rhodesy, I got your email really late last night, so we're not going to be able to take a listen to that piece. But if you would like to have it on the first part of the next stream, I can definitely do that for you. Or if you want to send a fresh recording because you have a little more time to prep it, then that'd be great too. But yeah. All right. Oh, thanks, Kale. Yes, Bethany, a mystery mug. That's right. Okay, we have a fun session today. We're kicking off with some more Chopin. So Quentin is continuing his journey playing some of the Chopin preludes. So we're going to hear from him first. And then Zero, I didn't see Zero chime in yet, but we'll be hearing Zero play the famous E-flat major Nocturne by Chopin, second up today. Gosh, I don't think I have any other updates. So why don't we jump in? Let me cue up Quentin's recording, and we'll take a listen. All right, here we go. Very nicely done. Let's give Quentin a round of applause in the chat, please. Nicely played. Yes, Bethany, that's a great comment. Bethany says she liked how you played the repeated phrases differently. Some of you, by the way, while we're giving Quentin this well-deserved applause, you know, sometimes I repeat what is said in the chat, and if you're looking at the chat, you might wonder why, because we can all see it. I know that some people don't listen listen without like viewing the chat live, and so I always try to repeat a little bit of what's going on for those viewers. Yes, Yes, lovely, awesome, well deserved, Quentin. Okay, Quentin. First, two questions for you. Well, one, I know the last time we heard you play, I think you were playing number 4 in E minor. And how long have you been playing this one? How long have you worked on it? I see in the video that it is memorized, so wonderful. And secondly, Quentin, do you have any particular questions of things that you know you're struggling with? While you think about those things, we can dive into a couple other thoughts of mine. Hello, Internet Privacy and Antonio. Let's just wait and see how long Quentin has been working on this, and then we'll dive in. A month. Wonderful, Quentin. Wonderful. Great progress. Yeah, very nice. Okay. So, Quentin, feel free if you have questions, just drop those in the chat, and if you'd rather just listen, and if things strike you as we go, of course, feel free to ask. So, first up. I always try to tackle technical stuff first and at the beginning, and then move into some of the more musical things second. Quentin, a lot of times I was seeing your second finger of your left hand as it was playing these arpeggios, the melodic arpeggios, the last knuckle, last joint. Quentin, great question, actually. Sostenuto, I'll get to that in a second. Awesome. Your last joint, the last knuckle here was bending backwards. I don't know if we can all see that, right? Let's see, maybe that. Instead of staying curved, firm, structured. So, for example, if you're playing second finger on this first arpeggio up, and however we cross, a lot of times, and especially when second finger got put on a black key, we'd have that little bit of buckling. Anytime we have that buckling of a joint, any part, whether it's in the finger, any of the 3 knuckles in the finger or in the wrist, right, or somewhere else, all of those are areas where we can lose efficiency and we lose control. And especially in a piece where we're trying so hard to make these perfect phrases that are mostly all in a very quiet dynamic, we can't afford any of that, right? So Quentin, bear that in mind as you play. And especially since this is memorized and you know the notes well, as you're looking down, when we go through second finger, keep that in mind, that we really don't want that to cave in. Hello, Zero. Okay. There is another technical thing, but I think I'm going to group it with overall musical discussion because it goes hand in hand with that. So, let's start with an overall question, and this could be open to anybody, because many of you probably know this piece fairly well, pretty well, maybe very well, maybe others of you have played it. What, if you were playing this piece and you were performing it, what would you be trying to say to your audience? What would your story be? What meaning does the melody have? I would love to hear some of those comments before we go further. And Quentin, please feel free to chime in with your own thoughts too. Quentin, have you thought about that? Do we have a deeper feeling, or are we thinking more deeply than notes, phrases, etc., dynamics? Rotzi, is that your story? Listen and be quiet. Enjoy the music and make up a story in your head. Dith. I love that. Dith said, I'm definitely not extremely nervous right now. Bethany, I love that comment. Bethany said, it feels like searching for something. I really like that. Great. If others have an idea, continue to chime in. It's very interesting. The beautiful music I mean, that Chopin crafts, the first 4 bars, I'm not going to show them to us yet, but the first, just so that we keep listening, right? So the first 4 bars are all B minor. And that sets us up beautifully for something totally different. I think that's really interesting to think about, that this one harmony, Chopin could have written anything. He could have written a bunch of harmonies moving around through every beat of a bar. And instead, we get one over the course of 4 bars. I think that's important to pay attention to. Rhodesy, you said the cold rain of autumn because it's raining today. I love that. And Bethany, you said it feels like dark green, like in the dim woods. I love that too. Bethany, are you synesthetic? Do you see colors and shapes when you hear music? And anybody else too? I use colors myself to describe things, and I use textures and other adjectives, but I don't actually see them like some people do. Some people literally see colors and shapes as they hear. Zero said, do you sing in your head while playing? Zero, I'm assuming you're asking that to Quentin. I think that's a great idea for Quentin also. Becky says, I think the baby finally fell asleep and the parent is trying to tiptoe out of the room, and it's not easy in the dark. I think that's cool. That's cool. Rhodesy says, wasn't harmony more simple? I wouldn't say that. Chopin's harmony is pretty complex. Much more so than the classical period that came before. Okay, cool. I think that a lot of those are really great comments. So Quentin, first of all, your job going forward is, can we come up with a really defined scene, a really defined meaning? If you're a very visual person, yes, like paint an entire picture, craft a cinematic scene in your mind. Everything that happens from phrase to phrase. And if you're not that kind of visual person, let's just, can we think a little more deeply about just an adjective that can describe maybe the entire piece, and maybe then also how can we describe on a phrase by phrase basis where things are going? Because if we have that underlying meaning, the first phrase, just to give you an example of the theme, I love that idea that Bethany said, feels like searching for something. And as we ascend, if we're truly searching, how we perform this ascension of the melody, and then what we do with the note that we land on. Is totally different, right? As opposed to, let's say, if we're just playing the notes in rhythms. Right? And, okay, sure. We could... Internet Privacy. Was this one played at Chopin's funeral? I thought it was number 4 that was played at Chopin's funeral. Maybe I could be wrong. Okay. So I was going to say we could boil this down to, sure, talking about rubato and pushing and pulling through phrases and where we grow and where we diminish, right? But first, and I always try this first with my students, if you can feel that using some other mechanism, painting a picture, etc., telling a story, if you can feel all those things through that mechanism first, it's going to be more natural coming from you, and it's going to be more inherently musical. The second step would be kind of going through, and if that really doesn't work or we don't have a strong idea of how that should work, then we can talk about how much time we linger on certain notes and how we crescendo to certain notes. I don't really want to do that for you today because, Quentin, I'd rather that you explore some of this on your own. With my own students, I usually give them a week or two to work through something like that and try to figure it out. And then if it's not working, and it's really not working, then we talk kind of in the nitty-gritty about dynamics and time and all that. Hello, Sir Wolseley. All right. Great. So, Quentin, that's the first thing. What are we saying with the whole piece? Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit more specifically about some phrases, because there are a couple things that are that consistently happened across the performance that I think if we could dial those in, that might also help us to figure out how we're going to push and pull with each phrase. So first up, I'm going to put the music on the screen for this. Okay, here we are. So starting from the beginning, Quentin, oh, I hid a layer. There we go. The beginnings of many of your phrases, Quentin, kind of sped through, whether it was bar 1, whether it was bar 5, like we were in a hurry to get through the arpeggio. And if you feel that way for a technical reason, well, this will also make that easier too. Take some time. There we go. As we ascend, and as we ascend through these, so that we're not in a big hurry to leave the root, that we feel the connection to the root. In both of these bars, the first note of the arpeggio is the root of our chord. So feeling that. Right? In measure 5. And if you take a little time and explore that first and not be in a rush, it might really nicely set you up for how you'd like to explore the phrase from there. Let's go on to the next page. Ooh, my iPad's working slowly today. Okay, so here we are at the top. We have a repeat. So I'm in measure 10. And then, of course, another repeat from what we had earlier. And then it changes. This would also be a great spot right here. Whoops. So again, same principle. Take time and make sure that we aren't in a hurry. You could also, something that I like to feel is a pushing back on us. So I draw in backwards arrows for that to feel like there's a force pushing against us that won't allow us to play. And go straight through that arpeggio. Okay? Okay. Let's talk about something else. So we're going to stick with these same measures, or this page, because we can explore the main theme and a couple of these other measures as well. Okay. Yes, internet privacy says it's easier to play slowly on a piano that sings well. That's true. That's true. Okay, Quentin, related to this, and this is going back to a little bit of a technical thing. We'll get rid of the sheet music for a second. When your left hand is playing these arpeggiations, you're doing a nice job of one of the things that we talk a lot about here on the channel, because it's not done often enough, letting the arm move. You're doing a great job of letting that happen and letting things stay in alignment. That's great, especially on our more expansive arpeggios. two things, though. We're a little disconnected from the keys themselves through each of these phrases. So when you're playing, we end up, it looks like, and we hear this as a byproduct, that we're doing a little bit of poking or pecking at the notes instead of feeling one more connected movement. So, Quentin, can you try to continue to do this great alignment that you're and using the forearm the way you're supposed to? But in addition to that, make sure that we still implement finger crosses. Yeah? And not just moving and picking up and placing again. We need to have both of those things. We can't just cross like this and be out of alignment, because that's not good. That's going to cause some weird things that can show people from overhead if we need to see more of that. But don't do that. But also don't just completely pick up. Right? The epitome of both of those techniques is combining them. So we maintain alignment, but we also can maintain finger connection, especially when our arpeggiation in here is so slow. So even when when 4 comes over 1, I'll show you that one from overhead, because this is one of the more compact crosses. So even when 4 comes over, we're not picking the hand up and putting 4 down, because it's not fast enough to have to do that. And we can more easily connect and show the intention of the phrase if the fingers have a little bit more connection in the keys. Yeah, Internet Privacy says a month is not very long for the piece to settle in, and that's true. You've made great progress in a month. Okay, now, related to that, Quentin, we're going to add one more thing to talking about the left hand. And that is, the more you get in touch with the meaning of each phrase, can you also show that to us in the actual gesture that the hand and the wrist and the arm is making? So, for example, even while the notes are holding or sustaining, this is still in motion. It's not, we don't just plant, right? And get stuck and then play the next note and the next one. And then, right? But instead, so the wrist, even as I hold this one, the wrist is still moving. It's fluid. There are two things that happen when we play like this and when we practice like this. One is that it truly can change how we project, how we show phrase, how we show the musical intention of what we're doing. Because as we stay in motion, it's going to encourage us to continue feeling present with the note that we've just played. Anytime we have a sustained pitch, instead of just sitting on it and moving, if we stay in motion, it feels like we are really actively participating in the sustain. Even though the piano's really doing it, nothing else is happening here, no matter what I do with the hand or the wrist after the note's played, of course, right? But it's a psychological thing, and it will really impact how you connect the next note of the phrase. Right? So think about that gesture overall. The second thing, and the second part of this, is that whether we like it or not, music performance is both, except in some competitions here and there, music performance is just as much a visual art as it is an oral art, right? Sound. Because when you go to a concert, most people watch the performer and you watch what they do. And most of the time, watching the performer also gives us some sort of feeling about what they're doing. That could be good or bad. Long Long is a great example of someone who takes this idea and maybe he goes very far with it. We could all agree he goes very far. Whether you like it or you don't like it, that's fine. That's your opinion. That's great. But he does this where he feels the singing and he feels the breath and he feels the sustain, everything about every note he also shows. Whether we go that far or we don't, that's up to you and whether you like it or not. But I think there's something really important to learn from that. And there's also, I think it speaks volumes about his popularity as a pianist. Like Internet Privacy said, I'm not keen on too many facial gestures. Yeah, I agree. And there are videos out there of like the best or the worst, however you want to think about it, faces from pianists. And I mean, strange. I don't know. There's some really strange things that happen. But I think that, yeah, if we can be that connected where we show a gesture with our playing, it doesn't have to be a grimace on the face. It doesn't have to be like a surprised look all the time. I've known some people personally that, I mean, the face just goes and it lights up like, like they're an actor on stage and they're not just playing. It doesn't have to go that far, but can we do something? Because the two things that are a part of every performance, one, connecting with our audience. And if we show gesture, they're going to be more connected to what we're trying to tell them because we're showing them some things. Part of performing, part of playing the piano is acting. If we're interested in playing in public, I do believe that's part of it. The second thing, and maybe the extra important thing, is that as we make those motions and as we make those gestures, they influence our sense of what's actually happening while we play. So that's why even in competitions where the jury or the judges are behind a screen, and they do this on purpose so they aren't influenced by the motions or the whatever, the look of the artist or what they're wearing or, you know, or, yeah, right, the motions that they make. So even in those competitions, I would always tell students, continue to do all of the gestures that you would as if the audience was present because it's going to change how you make music. And it's going to change it for the better. Whether they can see it or not, they're going to hear a difference. Let's see. Let me catch up on these comments. So, Sir Woolsey, you saw Long Long some months ago in Rome and you were expecting much, much more. That's interesting. And Julio, very nice. That's a great compliment, Julio. I think just to comment on Internet Privacy's comment about pianists having good days and bad days, and Sir Woolsey's comment, that is all true. And especially at those levels of really being considered the best in the world at something, that's a lot to live up to for every single audience, every single night they perform. And I would imagine that, still, Long Long's a not great day from Long Long is going to be better than 99.9% of pianists that are out there. That's part of what makes him one of the best in the world. And then when he's really on, it's just like a magical experience. The thing that makes me continue to come back and listen to him is that when I don't watch videos and I don't see him in performance, I actually really enjoy how he interprets music. So I don't have to see any of what he's doing, but when I listen to a recording, it really communicates to me, and I like it. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. Bethany says, a lot of it becomes subconscious, and you didn't know you were clenching your jaw on specific rhythms until you saw a recording. That is interesting. I have an aside about that. I don't know if I'll tell it now or later. Quentin, do you have any questions about everything that we talked about? I think that would probably sum up what I have for you today. No, Chopin would not play like long, long. But that doesn't, I'm going to go out on a limb here. That doesn't make long, long wrong. So Julio, a question related to this piece. How do you count the subdivisions properly? We can talk about that. Julio, are there bars in particular that you're struggling with counting those? Yeah, let me know, Julio. While you think of that, Julio, I'm going to tell my quick story that's related to Bethany's comment about clenching your jaw on specific rhythms. I had an eye-opening experience when I was, I think I was around 16 years old. I had my wisdom teeth out. I had surgery to have the wisdom teeth taken out. And, you know, you have a few days, if for those of you that have gone through it, there are usually a few days where things are sore or there's pain or whatever, and you don't have as like a lot of mobility in your jaw. And I learned a whole lot about all of the tension I carried in my face when I would play as soon as I had that surgery done, because I actually couldn't move anymore. And there was pain when I would try to move. And all of a sudden I realized all the time my jaw would be clenching or opening. I would be doing all kinds of things with my face, completely subconsciously, not aware of it at all. And I never had a teacher bring it up either. And it was this input that was never there before that taught me to stop doing that. Thanks, Internet Privacy, for mentioning the Schindler's List video. So Wolseley, I only had time to watch like the first minute of Ben Laud's video. I would love to watch some more of it. He usually does content I enjoy. Quentin, while Julio continues to write his question, let's talk about Sostenuto. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. Literally, Rhodesy answered that question for you correctly, because Sostenuto means sustained. So here we are in this bar. And right. That is where the name Sostenuto pedal comes from. So we know if we use the Sostenuto pedal, right, we only sustain a specific pitches. Whatever pitches, whatever dampers have been raised, for example, here if we're in B minor and I put the Sostenuto pedal down, those sustain and I can play everything else normally. Or, yeah, I can continue to use the damper pedal if I want. And then release what wasn't held by the Sostenuto pedal. That's how that pedal works. This term in the music does not mean to use that pedal, but it should affect our interpretation of the phrase. What do you all think if we see Sostenuto describing how we proceed through time, how we impart musicality to a phrase? What does it mean then? Because, right, typically, Sostenuto just means sustain it. Just let the sound ring. That's a hint. What do we think? Internet Privacy, I'll answer your question once we get through this little bit here. I don't know if people have no idea Or if people are typing something, if people have no idea, just say, I have no idea in the comments, and I'll stop waiting. Linger from Becky. That's nice. Bethany says, sound does. Bethany, can you... I'm not sure if you mean sound goes away eventually as it travels, right? Nancy, that's a great thing. Nancy's working on a Bartok piece entitled Sostenuto. Maybe a reference to a ringing bell. Internet privacy, perhaps it means the entire piece for it to be sustained. Hello, Jason. Yeah, lingering is, I think that's a great one-word summation of what this is. Because if we think about sustaining every pitch over the phrase and what that means, then as we move through time, we're probably going to take longer and longer and longer on certain pitches. And that is left up to us. Chopin hasn't given us just a very rough idea of where in the score it's actually printed, kind of between bars. As a composer, I'm very particular about the starting point of a marking. I don't know if Chopin was like this, but I can share this with all of you, that for me, when I write something, where I line up the marking means that is where the feeling of that marking begins. The end doesn't mean the end of the word, necessarily. It could be somewhere later. But I do, in this case, I really do feel that if we think of the sustained nature of the phrase, the lingering nature, as beginning right where that marking is, on B, I think we're going to play it with the intention that Chopin wanted. So there we go, Quentin. That is a little bit of a discussion about Sostenuto. Yes, Sir Wolseley probably said something similar because, yeah, I believe in the C sharp. I believe that there's Sostenuto is written in there or here. And again, that's usually where you hear people take time and really broaden. So Sostenuto, we could think of, it's like, it's so much more than just a retard. It's so much more than just a slowing down. It has a lot of extra meaning that really, we could use a lot of words depending on the exact phrase and the notes we're playing that could be very different. But yeah, was it Becky who said lingering? Really great, Bethany. Sorry, not Bethany. Becky. Okay. So wonderful. I don't think... Oh, here we go. From Julio. I had asked Julio about subdivisions. 1 and 2 and 3 and subdivision. You're trying to figure out how that applies to measure 6. Great. Let's take a look at measure 6. Okay. Measure 6. Let me just make sure. Measure 6 going up. Julio, my measure 6 is definitely going down. because that would be measure 6. This is 7. I'll start with measure 6, but if you want to revise that measure number, let me know if you mean 5 or something else. But subdivision. So we can give a placeholder to every rhythm that we have in a bar. And I feel that it's very important to understand these placeholders in order to really be able to give the correct sense of rubato. I'm looking at you, Sir Wolseley. When you commented about the metronome. Sir, this was in a different video. Sir Wolseley commented about, and I know it was a joke, but about how it's romantic music. Just don't use the metronome. It's romantic music. But yeah. Okay, so Julio, for every main beat, this is in 3, right? Every main beat. There we are. Every main beat gets a number. I'll put this in a different color so it sticks out a little more. So 1, beat 2. Now also notice how every main beat, the quarter note, is on a new beamed group of eighth notes. That's not done on purpose. That's part of the convention of notation, is to help show us where those beats are so we can see them more easily, rather than having one beam that goes across the whole measure, which would be more confusing to read. Okay, secondly, if we have a measure of eighth notes like this, every eighth note is halfway from beat 1 to beat 2. And we can mark that halfway point with an and. So all of these become 1 and 2 and 3 and. If I play just the right hand, 1 and 2 and 3 and. Subdividing gives us this point where we know exactly where every beat should be. That doesn't mean we have to play it metronomically. That's not metronomically, but I can still count the subdivision. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. Right? Becky, great question. I'll come to that in a second. Hello, Jeff. Oh, Quentin, awesome. Beautiful, beautiful. By the way, if Quentin has to leave, because I know it's late where he is, let's give Quentin one more round of applause, can we? Really, really nicely played, Quentin. Keep it up, for sure. Okay. So diving back into this for Julio, measure 6, going up the measure. I still don't know what you mean, Julio. Oh, measure 6 and beyond. Maybe that's what you mean. Maybe from measure 6 into measure 7 and measure 8. Let's keep going then, because this is great. We'll get into some 16th notes and some little grace notes as well. So let's continue this. Let's put our main beats in first. Notice how the right hand here still has beams to help show us each individual beat. So 1, 2, 3. Put the ands of the beats in. This is halfway from 1 to 2, or on the 8th note that's between 1 and 2. And here we have the luxury of having a beam to tell us the next 8th note is there. Lastly, now that we have a bar with 16ths, we need to, or we can, if we have trouble moving from 8th notes into 16ths, we can add a further subdivision. And typically, 16ths, we say 3 E and for each of those subdivisions. Now, notice that when we put let's say we put a metronome on, and we have 1, 2, 3. And then we have 1 and 2 and 3 and. But we also have 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and We've only written in this blue numbering system, right? We've only written 3 E and over the final beat, but we could still count that for the entire measure. So that's what those little highlights above the bar are talking about. If we were to put a metronome on, let's find a quarter note pulse first. 70 is pretty good. Okay. That's too fast. Let's make it 60. That's still a little fast. 50. Okay, so I'm using 50 beats per minute for the quarter note. If you want to put a metronome on, and we want to make sure that we continue to feel this as all correctly relative in our rhythm, let's see. The notes that are marked in green, or the rhythms that are marked in green above the bar, that's our 8th note subdivision. So if we need to take a beats per minute and we need to change it to show 8th notes, we're going to double it. We'll get the same overall tempo. So if our quarter note is 50, okay, if we double that, but we count 8th notes instead, same thing, but now we're counting the 8th note subdivision. And if we want to count the 16th note subdivision, and you want to hear that rhythm, we would once again double. So now the beats per minute would be, I'll turn that off until we're ready to play. For 16ths, 200. This would be 1E and 2E and 3. Or if I snap the main beats, it's 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Or if I count the 8th note subdivision with this pulse, 1 and 2 and 3 and. Or if we count all of the 16th notes, 1E and 2E and 3E and. Whoops. Yeah, internet, that is too fast for practice, for sure. But just to show, and it's too fast for performance too, but just to show how that works. So yes, Julio, so that is subdivision, right? We're taking our main beat, we find where all of those are, and then we can find all of the subdivisions up to and including the fastest rhythm we have in the bar. That's why we went through into 16th notes, or 4 beats, 4 subdivisions per large beat. Dith. So let's think about that for a second, because all 3 that I just showed, 50, 100, and 200, were technically at the same tempo. We're just counting them differently. But if we were to play a scale in quarter notes at 50, it would be. And a scale in quarter notes, but where the 8th note equals 100, it's the same tempo. And even 200, it's the same tempo. But we're counting, the difference is we're counting 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Sure, we'll count that. Or 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, or 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. But the underlying tempo is the same for each of those. Internet Privacy requested that I show you one slower one, so I will. The slower we go, the harder it is to feel the big beat. The easier it is maybe to find the subdivisions. So this is 40. Quarter note equals 40. That still might even be a little fast for practice. But going slower than that, and the quarter note becomes very difficult to hear and to pace well, to pace accurately. Here's another thing you can do that works on this same concept. If you're playing at a very, very slow tempo, like right now, this is 34. If you aren't subdividing that into smaller groups, it can feel like a complete guess. Yes, Sir Wolseley. It can feel like a complete guess where the next quarter note is going to happen. So instead, if we have a pulse this slow, at least while we're learning, can we subdivide it? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, right? And now we have double the markers. We can really hear our pace through that entire beat. Here's 32. I'll play this bar once more. Let's try that again. I'm in front of the metronome. So that could be another thing that we work on. Julio, I hope that answers your question about subdivisions. And until you're able to count all of them, I would suggest keeping one, whatever the fastest subdivision you need, count that, even when you don't have to play rhythms that fast. And then once that's more comfortable, we can feel things like 1, 2, 3, and a 1, and 2, 3. Yeah. Okay. Great. Oh, I think we're going to shift. We have to shift gears here. I may have missed a question, but Zero has been waiting patiently for an hour. Oh, Becky's question. What do you do with the X at the beginning of measure 8 on the F? I'll answer that real quick, Becky. We're talking about this one, this X. That is a double sharp. It works just like a sharp. So a sharp means that we raise the pitch from how it's notated up one step. F sharp, of course, is in the key signature of B minor. But from F natural, if we raise it 2 half steps, we get F double sharp. So technically here we're playing a G natural, but it's notated for the sake of showing the correct harmony. That's why it's F double sharp. But the pitch is actually a G. It's enharmonic with G natural because it's F raised 2 half steps. Oh, internet privacy. Flat on a trill. Flat on a trill means, that can mean, I've seen it mean a couple different things. If the flat, sometimes the flat can be below and sometimes it can be above. Most commonly, I think you'll find a trill symbol with the flat above the trill symbol. And that means it typically will trill to the next diatonic pitch. So for example, if we have D and we have a normal trill, we'll trill from D up to an E. But if we have a flat above the trill symbol, it'll be the diatonic note lowered by a half step. And then the opposite is also true. If we see trill with a sharp above it, that means trill to the note that is a half step higher than the diatonic pitch would be. So if we're in, for example, let's say D, our trill begins on D, but we're trilling up, we would trill to an E flat. No, that's, yeah. No, I did that wrong. Half step up. Let's say we're in B major and we're trilling on a D sharp. The diatonic note above it would be an E. The next note up would be an F sharp. Sorry, an F natural. That's what those symbols are talking about. So anytime we have sharp or flat in relation to the note that you start on, internet privacy depends on the period. And I believe, except in the case of earlier music, classical period, trills begin on the pitch notated. I believe that's correct. And we trill from there. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Zero, I'm reading your comment. So yeah, it's completely dependent on the period and on the composer that you're looking at. So yeah, it's kind of a piece by piece case that we need to take a look at. Webster asked, hello, by the way. Webster says, what's your opinion on grace notes? On the chord or before the chord in Chopin? So technically, yeah. Like in this piece, we have acciacchiatures, which should be performed on the beat. So for example, like that. Others will play. I like to play all three notes broken. And yes, yeah. Completely before the beat, that might be another thing that we tackle on a case-by-case basis, but completely before the beat would be a different marking. It would be a grace note without the slash through it. It would just be a standard grace, an appoggiatura. And we should play that differently. Yeah. So I guess it depends. I would try to follow the markings as much as possible. That would be where I'd start, and I'd have to have a really good reason for changing it to be something different. That's the best I can say. I don't think I would 100% of the time hold myself to that marking, whatever it is, if it's an appoggiatura and a acciacchiatura. But I would lean that direction until I had a really good reason to break it. Okay. Zero, we need to get over to Zero's piece. Rhodesy said, does this prelude have a tempo issue like Opus 10 number 3, where it's supposed to be quicker than the modern performance speed? I don't know of something in particular relating to this piece. It is marked lento assai, which would be very slowly, whereas Opus 10 number 3 is not. I don't believe it has marked lento. I don't believe it has a slow tempo marking at all. Okay. Zero, thank you so much for waiting. We're going to jump over and listen to your performance of sticking with Chopin. So maybe we'll continue to tackle some of these questions that have come up in the meantime. Zero is playing Chopin's Opus 9, number 2, Nocturne in E-flat major. Let's cue that up and take a listen. All right. All right. Let's give Zero a nice round of applause here. Nice work. Zero, last time we heard you playing, Zero, I think you were working on, was it that one? The last etude. Yes. All right. Wonderful. Okay, Zero. First things first. Oh, and hello. Is it Licia? I'm sorry. I totally saw you say hello like 30 minutes ago. Thanks for still being here. Zero. First comment. Right when you started, right when you begin, Licia. Ah, awesome. Welcome. Zero, right when you start, you're in a big hurry to play the first piece. And so you put your phone down and it was like, bam, turn, and we went right into the piece. Take a minute and breathe, especially because the first note is, gosh, the first two notes are incredibly important. So if we're not in a hurry to just get into the piece and start the melody, that's also going to set up the next thing for us, which is overall, I think we should, even in performance, we should take a slower tempo for this piece. There are some pianists that do take a relatively quick tempo. For example, like Vladimir Feltzman begins the first bar slowly, and then it's about this speed. I don't like that. I don't really think that conveys the title. It doesn't convey the sense of nocturne, night music. It doesn't convey the calm in the piece. In this also, we have very little, unlike some of the nocturnes that come later from Chopin, we have very little departure from the feeling of calmness and almost like stagnation in the melody. It's just floating, right? So Zero, take some time. This also goes hand in hand with the next point. If we take a slower tempo. If we take that slower tempo, we also open up a whole new realm of how we can use rubato and how we can inflect the phrase and how we can show so much happening with the melody while things have to be such a piano dynamic for most of this piece. Sir Wolseley said, can this be defined as a waltz? Gosh. I don't think it should feel like a waltz, because I don't think the tempo should be fast enough to be danced like a waltz. And Chopin would, if it was truly a waltz, he would have notated it differently as well. Yeah, Rhodesy so said it's 12/8, and that's exactly what I was just going for, because he would have notated all of these as quarters instead. And we've had a new bar. Bar 1, new bar. But instead, all of these fall. See, but I don't think it's clearly a waltz at all. Because if you play it like a waltz, I don't think you're playing it correctly. Because it's not. That sounds to me almost like circus music. And it should not be that, for sure. And by the time we choose, I think, an appropriate tempo for it, we should not be hearing that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We shouldn't be hearing that pulse. We shouldn't be hearing that beat 1 of every triplet is so much stronger than 2 and 3. I still disagree, internet privacy. Because a waltz needs to show bum, and then lift, lift, and down, lift, lift. And if we play that, we're going to make ourselves sick. Because all we get is the bass movement, and that leaves us without being able to inflect or go to the weak beats of the waltz, which you would never do in a waltz. You wouldn't be allowed to. Maybe. I still don't think it should be played like a waltz. Okay, the primary argument I'll have for that is all of the inflection that happen on beats like, there we go, like this stuff right there. If we were feeling it as a waltz at any tempo, it would never be okay to inflect that chord, which is the chord that has the most color in the entire measure. The appropriate interpretation, if this was a waltz, would be to fly by that and not give it any time. So, okay, enough on that. Let's go back. Let's see. Yes, Webster 3/4 doesn't. That's true. 3/4 isn't always intended to be a waltz. Absolutely. Yeah, really depends. Okay. So let's tackle 3 things. We're going to sum up. I think we got to 2 of them 0. 1, set yourself. Take some time before you begin the piece so that we can really show the beauty of the first and how that sings. Okay. Secondly, that allows your left hand so much more time to get through all of these jumps back and forth. And thirdly, related to that, because one of the questions you had was about left hand, and you were having trouble keeping the left hand quiet enough. I would agree with that. That's going to be made much easier with a slower tempo. Still not going to be super easy, but you'll have a chance, rather than if we're flying through this, it gets very loud quickly, and it's much more difficult to control. So that tempo can not only set us up for a really beautiful portrayal of the melody, but it's also going to make the left hand much easier. Easier to play lightly, let's say. Okay. 0, I had a handful of notes that you should look at. I don't know if they just happen to be wrong notes in this performance. But here in that first bar, I'm sure that you had a wrong pitch. I don't know if it was the C flat that we missed, but it very well could have been a C natural that you played or something else. So take a look at that. Let's just go through all of these real quick. Measure 3. I believe you played 2 Gs in a row here in measure 3 instead of F leading to G. Measure 4. We didn't get that harmony. I'm not sure exactly what was missed, but we didn't get that one. All of these things would also be easier if we slowed down. Right here, what measure is this? 10. Oh gosh, I cannot remember what happened there that I circled that. I feel like it would have been a pitch that we missed because that was on the roll of circling that stuff. But we'll come back to that in a second. Measure 12. Sorry, yeah, that's right. Okay, so 0, maybe that, maybe they were just flukes that happened in the performance today, and they're not things that you play all the time. But make sure we go and double check those, just to be sure that we really do have the correct pitches that we're going through. All right. Okay. Here we are. Now, back at the top. 0, when we have, there are a variety of places in here where Chopin has written out ornamentation, and he's also given us just the symbol. So right in the second measure, we get with a turn symbol. This is a great opportunity to talk about these accidentals written around an ornament, which Internet Privacy asked about earlier. Here we've got both a flat and a natural, and the flat above. So that means from C, the next diatonic pitch would have normally been D natural. So play D flat. On the bottom side of the trill, don't play the diatonic note. Play the natural version. Diatonic would have been, if we're in E flat, it would have been C, D, C, B flat, C. So those accidentals tell us to play C, D flat, C, B natural, C. Yes? Okay. Secondly, back off for 0. Anytime we're playing ornamentation in Chopin, don't be in a hurry. This is going to be the theme for today. Don't be in a hurry to get through it. Big difference between, this is usually how I describe it. If you play a turn like you would play it in Mozart, like that. Mozart probably wouldn't have written that anyway. But if we play it in that style, it would be very quick and it would be leaning toward the next beat. Right? It would either be that or it would be maybe perfectly divided among the rhythm that it's written for. And it would almost invariably be quick and to the point, no lingering, none of that. That's Mozart. But Chopin's ornaments are very different. They're opportunities to be extra expressive. And we need to remember that in 2 different ways. Because here, Chopin didn't always use ornaments when he wrote things. He didn't always use, sorry, let me rephrase that. He didn't always use the symbols. Sometimes he did. And when he did, those were typically places where we kept a bit more direction to the phrase or to the shape. Still not as much as from a previous period of composition. Oh, I think I may have just turned the page. Hopefully not. There we go. So, when we see an ornament from Chopin in a symbol, it has a little bit more forward momentum and a little bit more purpose. If he had written this out, and we can think about this as we see the later written out ornaments later in the piece, if he had given us C, D flat, C, B, C, and he had written all of that out in notation, it would be even slower or needing of more expressiveness. Now, that, what I just played, obviously, all of us know this piece well enough. We know that that's not how it goes, right? But if we saw those 5 pitches of the turn written out in notation, we would take more time when it's Chopin that has given that to us. When we see the symbol, it's more direct, but it's still not direct like a classical interpretation would be. I hope that's making sense for everybody. Yes, internet privacy. Well, I think the biggest trouble with waltz is that even a lyrical waltz has such importance put on the first beat. And that's where it comes back to me that I don't feel it that way. Sure, it's in 3. And sure, it has a hint of that like lilting nature that is present in waltzes, especially well-performed ones. But it's a gray area. We could call it a gray area. Yeah. So I still wouldn't call it a waltz because I want to inflect the weak beats far too much and far too more, to far greater than what a waltz would allow. And because of that, I can't think about it that way. Sure, it has a subdivision of 3. But also, the overarching phrase is another thing that pulls us out of that feeling as well. Yes, I'll agree with that, internet privacy. Yeah, it was. We're going to talk more about that in a second. Changing piano habits? Zero, that's a really open-ended question. If you could be more specific about that question, I could answer it a little bit better. Oh, maybe it relates to your previous comment. It's hard to practice slowly or play slowly because I'm used to a habit of playing fast. Okay. That's a great question, Zero. Zero, when you practice, and this is for everybody too, always have a timer. Someday I'm going to get a video out about this, but always have a timer or have a really great sense of time that we're spending working on something. And when we're trying to do something that's very different, we first, if it's easy to fall back into the habit of rushing or playing through something far too quickly, unfortunately, one of the best tools to help correct that is the metronome. Put the metronome on slowly, a very slow tempo, and make sure that we stick with it. Hopefully, we don't have to have the metronome on for very long in order to slow the tempo down and start building a new habit that says it's okay to play this more slowly. I don't like practicing too long with a metronome because it will just immediately throw musicality away. So we don't want to spend too long with that. But if you have trouble, maybe start with this. Set a metronome, pick a new pulse that is very slow. Let me give you one. I'll give you an 8th note pulse. Maybe a little slower than that. Okay, this will be very difficult, Zero. This is 72. So 8th note equals 72. I'm going to mark it up here for now. I know you can't see the screen, but it'll be there when we go back. Take that, set your metronome, play a bar. Maybe just the first phrase. Now here's the test. Turn the metronome off. Can you play it again, maintaining the same pulse without the clicking happening? Now, this is definitely, I think, too slow to be a performance tempo, but that's part of the point. Well, welcome back, Kale. Let me just comment real quick on the conversation between Webster and internet privacy. Because, yes, great composers choose time signatures. They spend a lot of time hemming and hawing over what time signature will truly feel correct. And 12/8, the time signature Chopin chose for this piece, is really closer to feeling it in 4 than in 3. It's much closer. So 12/8 is, if we need to feel a constant perpetual triplet motion, but with a feeling of 4, with a feeling of simple meter, then we would choose 12/8. But 12/8 is much closer to 4/4 than it is to 3/4. Yeah. Okay. Oh, Greg. Hello, Greg. Does anybody know? Let's go back to what we were just talking about. Does anybody know the, or maybe you've seen me talk about this before, or if you're a student of mine, I know some of you are here. Why 0 am I giving you a tempo of 72 for the 8th note to practice? Why is it so slow? What is the purpose? Why can't we, if you were playing this at more like 130, why can't we just slow it down to like 110 instead? To get frustrated. Oh, internet. Yeah. I know. I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying about the inflection of 3. Yeah. There is a maybe an undertone that we can feel that's like that. But it's still really in 4/4. It's still triplets in 4/4. 1, 2, 3, 4, which also means that we continue to place emphasis in different parts of the beat if we understand that, right? Because we'll lean into 1 and a little bit into 3 and then not as much into 2 and into 4, which completely changes, again, how we interpret each beat. Zero says to get a feeling of time. Licia says no mistakes. That's good. That's important. Yeah, Sir Wolsey said ew. Okay, nobody's really gotten the answer right so far. Whenever we have a habit, and it's something that we fall into repeatedly, we need to do something that's very opposite in order to break the habit. This could happen in a lot of different ways. We're talking specifically right now about speed and about tempo. In order to build a new habit that it's okay to play slowly, we need to go far beyond slow. I like to think about this as having a pendulum that swings, okay? And right now, we are on the very, very fast side, I think, of performance tempo. I don't prefer the music that fast. I don't really enjoy listening to it. Zero, you are actually obeying closer to the marking on the page. But the general consensus from most pianists, most concert artists, is to play this far slower. So we're on this far side of the pendulum. And if we want to end up here, we can't just pull our tempo back to here. Because if we try to pull it to here, we're going to end up here instead, which is closer to where we started. But instead, we have to pull our tempo back all the way over to here. And then, when we can truly let this feel good, we will have a deeper understanding of what it means to meet in the middle. We can apply this to tempo. We can apply it to a sense of rubato, is one that I really talk about often. And how if we're taking, no rubato and too much rubato, those are opposite ends of this. Let's see, this hand. Those are opposite ends of this pendulum swing. And sometimes in order to, for example, if we have a habit of taking too much rubato and we're over here, we can't just learn how to take less. Sometimes we have to push it all the way back to being strictly in time according to the notation. And when we do that, then we have a renewed sense of truly the underpinning, the rhythmic fundamental, the foundation of what the composer said, and we can go back and now we can find a middle ground. But without pushing far enough in the opposite direction, we're never going to find that middle. So that is why. It's not to get frustrated, but it's to really, as fast as possible, break that habit. I've told this story before on the stream. This is even slower than 72, by the way. But famous story, I know some of you know it, but to quickly reiterate, when Rachmaninoff was living in California, there was I believe it was a journalist coming over to his home. He was in the middle of practicing Chopin's Etude in thirds. And I think the account was that it took him approximately 30 minutes to play through the Etude once because his tempo was so incredibly slow. There's more underlying in that story. There's some really, really deep, powerful, advanced things we could talk about. But first, just recognize slow practice is extraordinarily valuable, far slower than where we'd like to perform. Of course, we all know that. We hear it all the time, but it's very valuable. Reflecting on, Bethany said to learn notes accurately and gain muscle memory. I'm actually, Bethany, because you brought that up in relation to slow practice, I'm going to point this out. Slow practice does not help us build muscle memory. It's probably what most of my beginner and early intermediate students have the worst time with, in that they're very good slow practicers. But all of that slow practice actually doesn't help to build muscle memory because all of the actions that we take at the piano are so disconnected in time that there's a whole component of learning that isn't realized by the mind. And so we have to balance slow practice, which is really important, with practicing faster. This is exactly why, like, if you practice something and you play it over and over and over and over and over again, and you play it at 60 beats per minute, and you can get it all right, and it's perfect, no mistakes, rhythm's great, your interpretation is good, you're making a nice phrase, but you're supposed to play it at double that speed, let's say 120. And as you push the tempo up, it starts to break, where you just can't do it. And you can't do it. And maybe that happens at 90 beats per minute, halfway there. And we still have another 30 to go. We still have another 25% to speed up to get it where it's supposed to go. Usually, that problem exists because we haven't done enough practice at a faster tempo. So, to Zero's benefit, Zero, by playing this and learning this with the left hand playing through this so quickly, you've really trained yourself, muscle memory-wise, to navigate all of those skips and those chord positions. See you, Sir Wolseley. You've really trained yourself well to navigate all of that, and your mind is going to keep up with it. It keeps up, and it does a great job. And it knows, your brain knows, and your muscle memory knows exactly where you need to go. And when you slow it down, you're not going to have any trouble finding the notes. Our trouble exists on the opposite side of things. I don't know if one problem is better to have than the other. But what we need, it goes back to this idea of the pendulum back and forth. We always need work on the opposite side in order to help push us to find the middle ground where we actually want you to be. Oh, interesting comment from Internet Privacy that age affects tempo. Using a metronome can force it up. That's a really cool thing. I actually have a short coming out, soon, maybe in a month, about that and how to use a metronome well to force the tempo up. Age, what I've heard described about age affecting tempo is less of a perception about the tempo itself and more to do with a difference in maturity of interpretation. So a lot of artists, especially if they competed in some of the major competitions, and we have some nice recordings of them, and we can hear them playing where they were, in their mid-20s, let's say, which is young for an artist, or, 18 years old, as we saw in the last Clyburn. And then listen to those artists play the same pieces 30 years later. when they're, instead of 25, they're 55 or they're 60. Probably their tempo is going to be much slower. And there are usually two things that are cited. And one is the need to kind of show off in a competition and show what you're capable of technically, and that you can play things that are incredibly difficult and you can play them flawlessly at insane speeds. It's part of the reason I don't love classical piano competitions, because I don't think that's the point of music, but it's what we live in. And so as pianists age, they, instead of just wanting to play slower because their technique doesn't support it, far from that, they usually take a slower tempo because they start to see the beauty in every single note. Instead of just aiming for the big phrase and saying something dramatic and powerful that's, 50 notes long, now they start to just pay attention to every tiny little nuance, from one note to the next note, from a fraction of a beat to the next fraction of a beat. And when they start to do that, the performance changes drastically. A great example is like Paganini's recordings of the Chopin Nocturnes. I believe he did 2 complete recordings of the Nocturnes, one early in his life when he won the Chopin competition, and one, it may be only about 5 to 10 years old. And the performances are extremely different. But same person, probably some of the same underlying feelings about the piece, but very different interpretation of tempo. Okay, let's go on. Okay, Zero. When we're playing this nocturne, now that we've slowed things down, the left hand is going to be much easier than it was, right? Which is going to allow some freedom to really focus on the beauty of the melody. I would do one of two things, or both of these things. As you play and as you really want to study what the melody is saying, don't let all of the left-hand notes confuse your intention. So first off, play the melody and experience it by itself. And without the left hand pushing us through, can we feel how those long notes need to sustain and have direction? And how to make a really perfect phrase that ends and now begins again. Which notes of the melody need more inflection? Which notes need to be leaned on? Like, that is kind of a neat one. But even more so, this. That resolves. And then goes on. And don't be in a hurry. So now that we've gotten back to this piece and we're talking about ornamentation again. At the top of the page, we had talked about when the ornament is written out. When the ornament is given in a symbol, not written out, it usually goes a bit quicker. Think about everything that happens in this bar. This is bar 4. This 16th note figure is an ornament. What are the important melody notes? Probably those. Whoops, there we go. Those are the 4 most important pitches that form the foundation of the melodic movement. We still get an idea of the sense of that phrase and what it's supposed to say with just those 4. Everything else is an expansion on that. So take time. And just like we said before, when they are fully written out, there isn't a symbol that would mean to do this anyway, but when they are fully written out, take extra time. Okay, as we go on. Oh, this was interesting. Right here, 0, you played this E flat. There it is. You played that E flat on the last subdivision of beat 3. You played it with that note. It doesn't exactly sound wrong. I'm sure that I've heard others do that because it sounds quite familiar. But the score says to do something different. Right? So let's get that rhythm right. Okay. Next up. Great turns, by the way, throughout here. You did a really nice job of playing those, executing them cleanly. It seemed like there wasn't any tension in there. They came out and they sparkled. Now, next bar, bar 6. All of these accents or expression marks, feel the breathlessness in this phrase. It isn't just going in one direction up to the top. But instead, it's da-dum, 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 da-da-da-dum. That would be too much in performance, yes. But if we feel what all of those slurs show, the slurs and the expression marks, it changes this from one feeling of pushing forward that leads us there to something that has much more drama and much more internal kind of fighting with itself. The melody doesn't want to ascend. It wants to resolve, and then resolve again, and resolve again. And then it's finally allowed to. That is a lot of... That's a lot of anxiety, really. I'm catching up on comments. Rotzi, yes, the expanded version of this piece, yes. I have a couple copies of that. You know, interestingly, very, very few people play it. People tend to play the original edition that is far less ornamented. Yeah. 0, we doing good so far? Webster and internet privacy talking about competitions. That's a rabbit hole. Rotzi, I wouldn't say that people don't play the extended edition because it's more difficult. I think people tend to find that the more simple ornamentation is actually compositionally superior to all of the extra flourishes, because those extra flourishes end up detracting from what the melody is really saying. Chopin already gives us plenty of places to show that in the original. I think that's why people choose. It's not that they can't play it. It's not that it's too difficult. It's that it's a little unnecessary. You know, that also kind of applies to the two versions of like the Rachmaninoff sonata, the second sonata, the B flat minor. Well, many people today play the revised version of the Rachmaninoff sonata, which is considerably shorter. Not because, again, it's easier, but because about 20 years later, Rachmaninoff eliminated a lot of the fluff of the composition. That might be offensive to some people. I actually really like the original version of the sonata. If I were to, I have never fully learned it. If I were to learn it, I would probably learn the original and not the revised version. Because I like all of the extra stuff, and I like the power, and I just like exploring that music. But a lot of people play the revised version because it is much more to the point compositionally. Yeah, Rhodesy, yeah, that is true. That the Osseo isn't. No, Chopin didn't really write optional bars. But if you remember Chopin, especially the way he taught his pupils and things like that, he probably would have given them things that never got written down. He would have given them optional ways to perform things. We do have some of them that exist that we know about, but he didn't show that in any of his manuscripts. And I don't think that's because he didn't want to. Of course, he probably would have played this nocturne himself very differently from day to day. Yes, okay, Zero. Zero said, do you keep your hands close to the notes in a nocturne generally? That really depends. Let's start here again. Yes, I'd say generally we're keeping the hand close, but allowing, especially there is extra arm movement that I put in. So the fingers are close to the keys, but I try to show more of the differences in articulations and how I would like to sing the phrase with more movement in the wrist and the arm. And none of these are really so fast that we don't have time for that to happen. One interesting thing to point out that is related to this comment. In my score, I have some of the fingerings that Chopin himself gave. And they are these bold fingers. And this happens in a variety of places in the piece where Chopin actually wrote to play same fingers, especially 5, and then continue down the hand. And that's interesting because I think today a lot of people would play 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 4, 1. Yes, but if you actually follow Chopin's mark, that lift creates a distinct change in how this is phrased. Zero, you might check some of that out. This is coming from the Chopin, the Polish National Edition, edited by Ekier, and there are a variety of fingers. The ones, yeah. The ones, I don't know which score you're using, but the ones in here, the bold markings are from Chopin himself, and they are unique, especially compared to how we would typically play phrases today, I think. But it goes right along with how Chopin felt about how different fingers had different characters. And so if we want to show the same character through a phrase, we're actually just going to move the hand and play with the same finger. Also goes, to make another point that you can still play legato and connected phrase, even lifting the hand with the pedal down. And Chopin did it. He would do it all the time. I bring that up because I've had kind of a lot of students that come to me after working with other teachers that play... Their previous teachers tell them everything has to be finger legato. And they come in with a lot of tension and holding on to everything. And we don't need to play with finger legato necessarily to create beautiful connection. Oh, Bethany, I will try. I don't know if we're actually going to have time for a Q&A today. But I'll see if we can get there. Okay, let's see. Zero, I think you had another question that I didn't. So you said when you play chords, do you move your hands? Are we making circular motions? A little bit. But not for every chord. Like that. That's excessive. But instead, taking the same idea, I did want to bring that up, Zero, because sometimes I found your left hand, where the wrist was sitting up high sometimes. Or we were releasing high and doing a lot of playing like this. Which, even if we're trying to use the downward motion of the wrist to drop into the keys, I think there's too much up happening too regularly. And especially at the tempo you took, my goodness. What I would say to do instead, if we can feel one circular motion that carries us through each beat. So 1, 2, 3, with the release at the top of that, right? And 1, 2, 3. Yes, I would experiment some with that, Zero. Yes, keep the hand in motion, but not for every single pitch. And here, gosh. Yeah, OCD King. Hey, thanks so much, OCD King. The less you would like to do with the left hand, and the less you want to bring it out, the more I would subdue those motions. Yeah, you said you were trying to use hand weight when playing, especially the last. If anything, Zero, the last chord of each group, like this one, and here, those should be motions that carry us up and away to allow the hand to travel back down. And we can facilitate that if we feel one bigger gesture that releases on the final note, rather than if we drop into you hear what happens. Yeah. Oh, you say it gets lost when you play with the pedal. It depends on how lost it gets. Because I'd say most of the time, this left hand should be present, but just so. Just barely so. Yeah, a little too much pedal there at the end, but just barely so. So continue to think about that. Yeah, weight is a good idea. It was a good idea. It's not a bad idea. But I bet, because of the tempo you've played, you now have so much practice with this that if we reverse that direction and release, we're still going to have enough of a feeling of sinking and dropping in that we're still going to, the notes are still going to sound because of the practice you've done. It's almost like, again, it's almost like an opposite. You practiced one way and it was productive and it was good and it made sure that We're actually getting those pitches sounding. The fingers are together. That's great. And now we want to change it so we can show a little bit more release. But we're just adding to it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Oh, let me see, Zero, if I had anything. Maybe just one. Oh, two more things. Two more general things, and then if you have any questions, we'll be sure and cover those. So, okay, first up, think about what this measure 12. Oops. What is this end of measure 12 saying? Think about what that means. It's very different from everywhere else, right? That's really the end. And then we move from there. Right? So don't just go through that, but what underlying meaning does it have? Also, there is a break in the phrase. So can we show a lift and a little breath? Yes, we could even do it. The score says no pedal at all. But you don't hear people play that way at all. But we can still somewhat obey that by saying this isn't going to be as blurred as what came prior. So show a release. And then we can, I'll leave it up to you. Becky, OT means we're going to try again. I don't know what do you mean by that. So I will answer that. Oh, it means we're oh. Just that statement, the musical statement. I mean, it's a beautiful turnaround to lead us back to the beginning. Oh, I'll say how I feel about it. So we have our, ending here. That is like a mumbling under the breath, or a little aside, like segue into saying this again, because this is the end. It's almost like a harmonic ornament, which is really cool. But I would play it one of two ways depending on the day. I might play I might play it out more, making it lead to, and treating it almost as if it is part of the opening of the next statement. Or I would treat it like a completely separate thing. I think both of those can be successful. Yes. Okay. Zero, that was one thing I wanted to mention. Second thing, right where you stopped, we have this other ornament, and it seemed like there was a little confusion about kind of how maybe to go about playing this. Through there. You will generally find that people don't play this as an even group of 13. They choose to line up notes with the left hand. And then the phrase is allowed to ebb and flow and be very natural sounding. And the two choices that you typically hear are, here, I'll highlight as I talk about him, lining up A flat with the next left hand. And then B flat. Those two. I'm accenting them just so you hear how those pitches line up. The other way that you'll typically hear this is with the A natural. It's just a different type of inflection. You can choose whichever of those that you like. There's a lot more dissonance there that resolves versus a more consonant approach to it. But both of them, I think, are very viable. Zero, do you have any questions that I can answer before we finish up on this today? Rotzi, a quick answer to your question. Synthesia, I do not think synthesia helps with sight reading, really at all. I think it's an interesting way to learn music, but it's missing a whole lot of information that's on the page. Thanks so much, Nancy. Yes, if you could hit the thumbs up button if you haven't, I'd appreciate that. Okay, Zero. Yeah, nice work. This is going to be so beautiful once you slow down. Slowing down is going to help lighten the left hand. And thirdly, slowing down is also going to really help shift your focus to the melody. That's what we want to sing, and that's what we want to show all this inflection with, and not be so kind of mentally preoccupied with all of the jumping around that the left hand has to do. Zero, you've done a fantastic job. If you're, especially, are you completely self-taught, just watching stuff on YouTube? You're doing really, really wonderful stuff. So congrats. Okay. Yes, Becky, purely beautiful. Both pieces. Absolutely. Yeah, let's give Zero another round of applause. Thanks, Bedlington Groomer. Another round of applause. Oh my gosh. Thanks, Rob. Yes, great work, Zero. When you get to the end, and when you finish the piece, please send us another recording. I think we all want to hear what you're going to do with the ending. Yeah. Sorry. Especially this. We want to hear you play that, Zero. That's where you get to have fun with all the speed that you want to play with. Yeah. All right. Woo. Okay. We are going to wrap up. I don't think I'm going to take any other questions today because we've already been on 2 hours and have taken some in the meantime. Zero, maybe just a little bit of rotation. I'm mainly using it to help 4. But mostly with the fingers. It's such a quiet little thing and it needs, just tiny little movements there. Oh gosh, I think there's been this whole running conversation about piano competitions, I think. And I'm not going to go back and read all of it. I don't know if it got mentioned, but, for example, Yuja never competed. She wasn't allowed to compete by her teachers. I think competition can be, I saw something, let me just say this. I saw a previous comment here earlier in the stream that said, I don't remember who said it, sometimes the best pianists are ones that don't place. And I really believe that can be the truth because a lot of times, juries have very different, each member of the jury might have a very different opinion about how things should be. And part of what I try to do on this channel is to help show people that unlike what has been a part of classical music education, there are some things that are a tradition that we need to learn and we need to obey and we need to follow. We're going to play more accurately, more correctly, more according to the composer's intentions if we do that. But secondarily, there is so much that we can do with music to make it ours and to make it an individual expression of emotion and of art. And a lot of that, when you play for competitions, can go away. A lot of the individuality can go away. Well, thanks, internet privacy. And that's great that my arrangements do. I try to, when I perform the classics, I try to speak them in my own way. And, it's interesting because I have a lot of people that really love them. A lot of people that have listened, from teachers, privately or in master classes and other places. But they also usually, they're more polarizing because I do try to say things that I feel. And it was interesting that when I was competing, I guess internet, that's one way to do it. I don't mind the comparison. But I do think it's interesting that when I was competing, and the whole point was to be compared to others, that my teacher would work with me on changing my interpretation to better fit the jury who is listening, to have a better chance of winning. And I think that component of competition is not great because it completely removes the individual. So I may have done well in some competitions, because I appeased to the jury rather than playing how I truly felt about it, about the music. And I guess it's great to be able to make that choice, sure. But to me, that's the problem with how competitions are scored, because it's usually, not always, but usually the pianist that offends the least gets the highest score. And, and then we call them the winner. Now, I don't think that Yoon-Chun Lim is a pianist that offends the least. I think he's an incredible pianist, and he's incredibly young and already very mature technique of, any of the giants that have ever lived. I think that's an exception. I think he's an exception to this case that I find so often in competitions, where one of my mentors was talking with another of my teachers and saying, who should we invite for a master class, and so and so and so and so. I'm not going to name any names, but they agreed to invite this person that came in 6th place because he was probably the best. He didn't place, he didn't win an award, he was finalist, sure. But he had so much to say, but because he was polarizing, he didn't get the score to be in the top. He got really high scores from some and didn't score well from others. But wonderful pianist. Okay, Bethany, see you. This has been a lovely stream talking about a lot of Chopin and some other things along the way. Oh, yeah, Webster. Yep, Webster said you need to be on the jury's good side. Yeah. I have one more story I'll share about that. And then Rhodesy, as piano competitions require part acting from the pianist. I think that a lot of young artists, ones that are competing, haven't been allowed to develop their own voice. And that's the part of classical music education that I have a passion to change. I want people to develop their own voice, knowing the foundational elements. And I also think that's part of why you see so many great artists today, so many technically superior pianists, but I feel like for the most part, they are saying less and less with their music, or they are saying less and less different things with their music. And I really wish that would change. You know, it's easy to find a live recording of Rubinstein where he didn't play perfectly, or Horowitz where he didn't play perfectly. Those guys, I mean, it was rare that they played a full concert and didn't mess up somewhere, but they said so much. And I think that a little bit of that is missing because of the mentality, both in university and in competitions, that, you know, it's more about obeying the teacher who wants it done one way. And that way is the only way. So my last story of the day, because of Webster's comment about college exams and the juries being on the jury's good side. You know, when I was taking auditions for my bachelor's degree, I auditioned a ton of places. Well, anyway, two really stand out because one was at the Boston Conservatory of Music, and I thought maybe I was seriously considering going there. And when I played, I remember even the concert hall. When I played there, the head of the keyboard department ran out of the hall after me to shake my hand and to tell me how much he loved my playing, among a couple other things. And I was only 17. I think I was there with my dad. He was standing there next to me, and we left after this exchange. And he looked at me and he said, "I think you got in." And, you know, lo and behold, yes, I got an acceptance letter. And I was actually told I was their top candidate of all of their auditions. Now, contrast that with, I played at the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. I played an audition there. I was living in the state. I lived in the suburbs of Chicago at the time, so it was my state school. University of Illinois definitely doesn't have the prestige of Boston Conservatory. And I didn't even I got in, but I didn't even get a scholarship offer. And I think I didn't play poorly, not at all. But really, like the difference in who was judging my performance and what I did. And at one place, it was the best of thousands of candidates for the year. And the other place, it was like, eh. And I think that's an interesting thing to reflect on because in both of those cases, my playing wasn't all that different, but how it was interpreted and what people thought of it was drastically different, depending on who was there listening. Both of them were sets of professionals. So anyway, that's my story for the end of the day. Yes. Sometime we could talk about preparing for auditions and all of that kind of stuff, or competitions. And I know some of you watched Dennis Zhdanov's channel, and he did a video on his perspective on competitions recently. We could chat about that too. Oh, in any case, I do have to run. This has been a lovely stream. Thanks to Quentin at the beginning. I think he is gone. But thanks to Quentin for a lovely Chopin Prelude, and Zero for presenting this Nocturne. It's been a lot of fun working through them. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Rotsi, I know you sent me something, so send me again if you want us to take a look at your playing in the next stream. As always, if you would like your video to be shown here and to talk about it, there's a little link to how to do that and how to submit that in the description down below this video. As always, practice smarter, not harder. Thanks, everybody, again for being here. The next stream is in 2 weeks. So I'll see you at the end of September. All right, everybody. Take care. Have a great week. Happy fall, if the weather's cooling off. And, oh, yes, thank you to whoever sent me this. Lovely. I appreciate it. Okay, everybody. Take care. See you in a couple.